Welcome to the show today. We have a special guest for you, and I am really excited. If you guys are called to be a communicator, lead from the front of the room, if you know you want to be a speaker or you are a speaker, and you want to take either the words that you're saying, maybe you want to just have a podcast, that kind of a thing, this interview is for you. Mike Pacchione, he is an international speaker and speech coach who specializes in helping executives, athletes, and entrepreneurs deliver smart and engaging messages to audiences of all sizes. He has trained more than 10,000 employees from companies like Nike, Microsoft, and Slack. Many of Mike's clients are industry leaders with seven-figure businesses, best-selling books, and thousands of followers. That includes clients like U.S. Olympic gold medalist Scott Hamilton, New York Times bestselling authors James Clear, Donald Miller, and Amy Porterfield, as well as popular online entrepreneurs like Pat Flynn, and the list goes on. Mike, I'm super excited to be here with you and to chat with you about speaking and communicating and even just storytelling and all the fun things. So
Love
thanks for
it.
being here.
Yeah, thank you. This is going to be a good one. I love speaking to people who know about speaking already, and hopefully we can unpack that for your audience.
Yeah. Well, Mike, knowing what you know now,
Mhm.
if you had to start over, like shut everything down, whatever happened, I don't know what happened, but in this proverbial story, you had to start all the way over from scratch, knowing what you know now, what would you do?
Wait, start over am I like 28 again or my actual age?
Your actual
I'm like
age
oh,
right
so
now.
it's 2024. Okay.
Yep.
Um yeah, if it were like the Spider-Man movie where I get deleted from people's memory, and I were starting over. My thing would be I still have the same knowledge about speaking and how to do that well and how to make stories work and all those things. My first move would be to try to find the person I know, or maybe like a friend of a friend that I know who it is most crucial that speaking goes well for them. And I would train them to be the best speaker that they could be. No, rewind. I would find the person who it's the most crucial and they're the most connected. And I
Mm.
would help train that person and allow like the legend to grow via them doing well, them telling other people, them referring business to me. That's how I would start.
I love that. First of all, I'm just going to do a plug for it's not always about what you know, but it's who you know,
Yeah.
right? Because they have to be connected as well. And I don't know. I'm such a big,
I feel like it's, yeah, I've thought about this a lot. I think it's both, right? So, because I think in people's stories, a lot of times, and even myself, when I tell my story, I'll minimize it inadvertently, but I'll just say things like, and then I met so and so, and then I helped her with the speech. But I'm leaving something out because it's actually, I met someone, well, let me just, okay. So Amy Porterfield, I was just thinking about her like today. I met her at an Italian restaurant in Portland. It is totally arbitrary that I met her. But so there's a version of me telling the story where I make it sound super. I don't know what the right word is, but just I make it sound like God smiling on me, and then like everything went hunky dory. But I'm skipping a step, which is I'm good at what I do,
yeah.
right? So it's like I met Amy at a restaurant. That was the lucky part, but I was good at what I do. So Amy hired me more than one time, and she referred me to other people. So I just think that's relevant because I think a lot of times we leave out the part where we're good at what we do.
Yeah, that's so good. So let's dive into your story a little bit because obviously being good at what you do as a speaker and as a speech coach. And you guys, I went to a really great conference. It's with ConvertKit, Craft and Commerce, and took Mike's training, and he was really great. And it was a room packed full of other speakers like myself and facilitators like myself, and those who wanted to either learn more or get better and grow. And I remember sitting there in the room and he did such an amazing job at not only involving the audience, involving us participants, but he really moved the room and read the room, which I love to see because I think even in today's world, everyone wants to be a speaker. Everyone thinks that just
Yeah.
getting up on stage and having a microphone is like the bee's knees. But there's a difference in getting up and talking at people compared to whether it's using your story or like having the capacity to bring the room with you into a journey, and really making an impact. And Mike, you have made such a beautiful impact with your stories. And also, you did a great job at equipping those of us in the room to be really great storytellers. And I remember even having those couple girls that came up to the room and they first started with their story, and then we got feedback, and then the girls got feedback, and then they told their story again. And it was just a really great, even just in a quick
Oh,
moment.
you were at that training. Oh man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it was really neat to see, like with a couple little tweaks here and there, that someone can grow really exponentially.
Yeah.
Um, so let's start with your story and even how you like, okay, so you're good at what you do and you met Amy
Yeah.
Porterfield. Yes. So it's what you know and who you know. But what does it look like to get good at what you do? Like, what has been your story to get good?
Yeah. I feel like anybody who's taken a branding class, what you're supposed to do is your about me page is about your audience, really, right? So you're not supposed to like, here are the bullet points of my life. So that was always hard for me because I felt like I needed to fabricate a story that wasn't true.
Mm,
Because what it should be is uh Mike used to get really nervous and break out in sweat when he had to take the stage, but I always liked it.
yeah.
It's, going back to elementary school, I loved show and tell. I loved current events. I love getting to the front of the room and I grew up in Philadelphia. I remember being in fifth grade. We had a current events weekly assignment, which was like you go to the front of the room with a cutout piece of the newspaper and you would explain you'd explain that piece of the newspaper to the class. And I always loved it. I never knew it was something you could do for a career. I did get very lucky with something that happened. I was going to graduate school in Portland. I had a guy who I was teaching a class uh, as an adjunct, and I had a guy who came to my class, and he comes up to me during a break and he says, Mike, I feel like you're a really engaging presenter. I actually bring in speakers at Nike. Would you like to come present on campus sometime? So, like, okay. It seems like something I should do. I think he was getting paid like $1,600 to teach that class, like some minor amount. And is Nike going to pay me $10,000? Is this going to be free? What is this going to look like? I had never done anything like that before. I'd always been good at being in the front of the room. Well, fast forward a little bit, presenting at Nike, even today, is one of the harder assignments. As an audience, this is not disparaging people who work at Nike, but just they are type A, they are A players, they are competitive. And at the time I was always teaching the college students who were just thrilled I wasn't using PowerPoint, They're like, "Whoa, he's writing on a whiteboard." This is my favorite teacher. Uh, so I gave my speech at Nike and it was fine. There were a few people who came up to me afterwards and said it was good. Looking back at it, it's a B, maybe a B plus if I grade on a curve, but it wasn't. I mean that's you want that to be. That's where the legend was born.
Yeah.
But this is the part where I had to take a step back and say, okay, huh. That's the first time I've ever presented and it wasn't like people were talking about me afterwards. Why was that? And that was around the time that I started looking into what you could do with speaking as a career. So the short version of it is I started researching companies that do like corporate trainings and things like that. I found this one in Silicon Valley that seemed pretty good. I did not even know what Silicon Valley was at the time. I had heard of Silicon Valley, but I always thought that was like Silicon Valley, comma, California. Like I didn't know there were these, it's like Sunnyvale and Mountain View and these places. So I found this company called Duarte. I was naively optimistic enough to send the founder of the company a really good email. And I basically said, can you help me figure out if I'm good at this? It was really good timing. They were just starting their training department. And from there, I flew all over the world. They hired me to do their trainings, and I flew all over the world doing trainings for some of the biggest companies you can think of. And what's really, really cool about that, and where I get to help people now, is like basically everything that could go wrong did at some point. I mean, I did hundreds of trainings for them. So when I work with people one-on-one now, all the time people be like, well, what do I do if blank happens? Or what do I do if this happens? And all of those thises happened to me at some point. So towards the end of my stint at Duarte, I loved working there. I know a lot of times the entrepreneurial story is, oh, and I couldn't stand working for somebody else. Like I working there was great. I just hit a point where two things were happening. Number one, we were having a child, and I know some people keep traveling all the time. I just didn't want to. And the other thing was I had hit a point where I needed to see what I could do by myself. While I was working at Duarte, I had taken side projects, and it was, I mean, that is when I met James Clear and worked with James when Atomic Habits was coming out. I needed to see what I could do outside of this umbrella company that was like niche famous. So probably a longer answer than you're looking for, but since then I've helped people who are already like at least competent grow into good, great, excellent, world-class speakers.
I love that. So bring us into some of your thought process of, okay, I've got this really great gig. I'm working for this company. I'm speaking and doing what I'm great at. And bring us into your thought process of, okay, now I really want to see what I can do on my own. And how did that feel? Like, what was that? Like, what were some of the steps that you took to take the leap into that, like that leap of faith, if you
Yeah.
will, into that next season of your life? Take us into some of the behind the scenes of that.
Yeah. Well, I think mentally is a little like when I was in college, I enjoyed college. And on one hand, I'm like, I never want this to end. And on another, it's like, well, it'd be pretty weird if it never like if I went to college for like 9 years or something and there wasn't some medical reason for that. Like it'd be pretty weird. Like, what's that guy still doing here? And I felt a little that way. Like it was so great working there, and it also needed an endpoint. But to answer your question more clearly, like I'd always heard these stories of people who like really bet on themselves and they had $27 left and they quit their job in a blaze of glory and they're like, well, I'll show you. And if that's like if that's your personality, more power to you. That is not mine. I mean, at a blackjack table, I'm spending like $1, you know. I'm not at the high roller table. So what I did, I did not realize what I was doing at the time, but I'm able to look back at it and realize it, which was I was basically the whole time I was at Duarte, I was making small bets on myself on the side. And what I mean by that is I was doing side projects that were, I mean, they paid me, but they were also proving to myself that I could do it.
Yeah.
So after doing that for a while, there was just I had no imposter syndrome as to my skill level.
Yeah.
Business wise, I did, but my skill level as someone who could help other people with speeches, like that was gone. So I'm not saying I like never mess up and every single thing, like I just fire off one draft and we're done in a half hour. And that's not true, but I know that I'm really, really good at the speech stuff. The business part was what was harder. So that was the stuff that I had to get advice on. And looking back, I got kind of lucky on a few things, but that was the stuff that I had to get advice on and referrals to. But like honestly, I did a really good job. I did a really good job with all the people I've worked with. They referred a lot of business to me. Um, and once you have one or two big name clients, it's so much easier to attract other business, get on stages talking about stuff because the person on the other end is just looking at it and they're like, this guy spoke at Nike. He's helped James Clear. He's helped Amy Porterfield. Just so much easier for someone to say yes to that person than person B who is promising you that they're really good, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess the short answer to your question is I was making bets on myself on the side so that when it came time to make the big bet, which was to go out on my own, I was pretty confident it would work.
Yeah, I love that. I recently did an episode about it's called like putting in the reps
Mm,
of it. I remember being a volleyball player. And when I was like, okay, I knew I wanted to go to college and play volleyball. It was going to help pay for my scholarship. And, my parents didn't have a ton of money to pay for college when I was growing up. And I knew that this could be a vehicle that could help me continue my education. And I was naturally good at it, but I knew that I had to become better. And I remember learning what it looked like to put in the reps. And I
Yeah.
would hit the volleyball up against my garage door and hit after hit and pass after pass. And I would go to the weight room and I got these jump trainers that I would jump with, and my calves hurt like crazy. And I would walk around after the weight room and my quads were burning and so sore when I would try and sit on the toilet. But it was this process of putting in the reps so
Yeah.
that when a college recruiter would come and watch me play, or when I sent in my video to a potential prospect for a college, it was like, actually, like, it's similar to what you're saying. It's like, no, like, I've put in the reps and I'm confident in this space, and I've gotten like now the external results and the external validation where this big college is looking at me and I'm talking to this other big college, and all of a sudden multiple colleges are trying to recruit me. And so it became this snowball effect that
Yeah.
invited me into playing bigger. So I love that. And I think that a lot of times, at least in my understanding, where I remember when I first wanted to start speaking, it was like, all right, I want to be a speaker. And it's like, oh, but nothing on my external world looks like I'm a speaker. Like, nothing on my website. I don't even have a
Uh-huh.
picture of me with a microphone. I have none of that stuff. And it looked like, okay, like putting in the reps and getting training. And then all of a sudden, like,
Right.
not only waiting, then like, just, oh, some people are like, yeah, I'm gonna put it on my website and people are just gonna hire me and I'm gonna be a speaker. It's like, no, there has to be like social proof, and there has to be
Right.
excellence in what you're doing, and you have to put in the reps to then all of a sudden it is getting those bigger names, and all of a sudden you have the reputation so that it becomes more like, yeah. So I just love what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, totally. But that is the thing for sure. That when you put in the reps, whether it's business or volleyball or speaking on a stage, when you put in the reps, so what everybody's seeking is a world where you have no fear. But like that actually would be a very boring world.
Totally.
What you actually want is a small amount of fear, because that's what will propel you to the best performance.
Yeah.
That's true in sports, it's true on a stage. What you don't want is I didn't put in the reps. I haven't been practicing bump set spike. So now people want me to try out and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. That's what we're trying to avoid. And metaphorically, same thing on stage.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to touch a little bit on what you said in the beginning, how you were like, I was always comfortable in front of the stage. Because I
Yeah.
think in the entrepreneurial world, a lot of times, I would say that I've at least noticed the majority of the story is like, I didn't ever want to speak, and I was so scared of speaking, and I was so scared of getting up in front of people, which I get it. Public speaking is the number one fear over death, right? Like,
I disagree with that, but yes,
no, so
statistically,
do
yeah.
I. So do I. Because I'm similar to you, to where it's like, I actually loved being up in the front of the
Mhm.
room, and I
Yeah.
loved like, I was totally like, it was great and it was comfortable. I think for me, I actually received a lot of criticism around being so comfortable leading and being so comfortable, and
Oh,
that
interesting.
it was like one of my natural talents and natural
Wait,
tendencies.
wait. Sorry to cut you off, but can you give me an example of like what criticism did you get?
Yeah. So when I'll give you an example. So when I was Mrs. Idaho,
Huh?
some of my then best friends, they were all of a sudden started saying, well, who does she think she is? And she's Mrs. Potato Head, and starts prancing around and all of this stuff. Like, so there was like it was like stepping out to lead in a whole new way, and I received criticism for it. Or I remember another thing that I had, another gal who, she was just like, you only want to be at the front of the room because you just want all the attention on you. And like,
Oh, yeah.
like, that's not like my heart. Like, I want to like move the room and move people into like impact and into action and into living out their biggest purpose and destiny. And that has nothing to do with me. Am I a conduit for that? Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's been this space where knowing that I'm talented and gifted in this communication space, having received criticism for it, that was some of my healing process that I had to go through. But on the other side of that, to where I actually know it's definitely one of my gifts and it's so fun. But I want to kind of talk about like, okay, like what does it look like if you know that you're gifted in this space? How do you go from good to great?
Mm. So my first thing is like, are you actually good? Um, which I'm not, Charity, I'm not saying that to you, just like as a general thing.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I found that the self-awareness around speaking can be lacking a little bit. So a couple of things are examples of that. Number one, a lot of people, I have had so many people who've told me I'm best when I'm winging it. And then I watch them, I'm like, no, you're not. You feel better? Like, here's what that is. This is you feel better winging it because now there's not a script that you can remember, you can forget words from, but you're not better winging it. Like not for the audience, you're not. The audience can't follow you. It feels better to you because you're on stage and you're just like, oh, now I can talk about butterflies. Like that just jumped into my head. But that is not that's not true for the audience. That's one thing, one self-awareness thing. The other is, are you actually good? And the reason I bring that up is because uh, the bar for speaking is pretty low. So I think a lot of times people think that they're good, and what that really means is just I don't freak out when I get on stage,
Yeah.
which is better than a lot of people, to be clear. But to me, good would indicate that I get off the stage. If I'm a good speaker, I get off the stage. And if I were to go like walk up to a random person in the audience and just like ask them to tell me some things they learned, they can do that almost effortlessly. That's a good speaker. Uh, yeah, that's a good speaker. So if that's where you are, then getting to great is like, well, first thing we have to figure out is what does great look like? So is that your speaking style? Is that having more sound bites? Is that the stories leave more of a mark? Is that when I'm on stage and I'm talking about my book or my newsletter or whatever, more people are signing up? Like what does great look like? That's what you have to figure out. And we have to figure out who you want to be. And I don't mean that in the sense of I don't know, Charity, who's like a great speaker? Who's someone you look at and like, oh, that guy or that woman is fantastic. Like who is that for you?
You probably don't know her, but her name is Haley Braun.
Okay, Haley Braun. Okay, let's use Haley Braun. So it's like if Haley Braun is great, what are the things that Haley Braun's doing? And does Charity want to do all of those? And if she does, is she at a 5 right now? Is she at a 9 right now? We're just trying to get from 9 to 10. Like, where are we? But what we're trying to do is to get to Charity's version of Haley Braun.
Yeah.
And the mistake that people make is they try to actually be Haley Braun.
Yeah.
But you need to be yourself. Yourself, not quite emulating Haley Braun, but yourself trying to reach her level.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's good. So I know you have a couple really great tips and talking points.
Mm.
And we obviously have been sharing some different stories back and forth. So I'd love for you to chat a little bit about how to be able to perfect your stories, because I think that that is something that makes speeches really, really stick. I
Yeah.
remember when I started to learn the power of story. I was
Hmm.
one of the girls that beforehand it was this, okay, lots of facts and figures, lots of logistical
Yeah.
things, and or I would like tell a point and tell this oblivious what like the you should live out your destiny and your purpose, right? It was like this
Uh,
oblivious, like in
yeah,
the
just this
cloud,
miscellaneous, like fluffy.
mystical, fluffy thing, but
Yeah.
there was never a story that really grounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember when I began to understand the importance of story, that I actually began to take these really impactful or what could be impactful points, and it actually allowed them to land
Yeah.
with people when I was communicating. So, why don't you share about storytelling and how to perfect your stories?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm so glad that you position it the way that you have. Let's be honest with ourselves. After you leave a conference and you're looking back at it, what's the stuff you remember? It's probably one of two things. Some sort of one of three things. Some sort of information that surprised you, something that challenged you. So something that gave you a kick in the gut, like I'm never going to get better if I don't improve on blank. Or the third thing is stories. Like those are basically the three things. Now, you can't have a speech that's story one, story two, story three without some level of elaboration. It still needs to make sense to the audience, but stories are worth perfecting. I mean, this is stuff that people remember. And I can think of multiple speakers who tell the story, same story over and over again, and because they've perfected it, it impacts their audience in an amazing way.
Yeah.
And the best example I can think of with that is, and I've cited him from stage. Actually, you probably saw this. Joshua Becker runs this site called Becoming Minimalist. I won't retell the story, but he tells the story of cleaning out his garage, his son wanting to play with him, and he says, "No, I can't. I need to clean out the garage." And then he sees his son over on the swings, just like waiting for dad to go play with him. And it takes Joshua weeks to clean out the garage. And he's told that story for like 14 years. And he said it is the beginning of every first speech he's ever given. It connects with his audience in a way that nothing else could. Joshua's written multiple books. He gets, I want to say, 250,000 YouTube views every single video. He's like, I really think that story of the garage, without that story, I don't know if there is a becoming minimalist. That's
Mm.
like the power of a great story.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that one, and this is true for a lot of good stories, it's not that remarkable of a story. It's like my friend Chelsea Pyatt says, what you're looking for is relatable, not remarkable. Now, there's some exceptions to that. Once in a while, there is that story where you're just like, what? And those are awesome. But most people don't really have those. What you're usually looking for is something relatable that you take the time to whittle into something that will connect to the audience. So, um, one of the mistakes that I think people make is they feel like this is a good story and it will work. And that's true. But what you actually want is to put the work in so that story is awesome and you're not wasting words and you're not rambling. And now it's a great story. Because if it's a great story, when I tell it to Charity, she goes and tells one of her friends, who tells someone else, who tells someone else, just the way I did that with Joshua's story. He didn't do anything today. And I'm spreading word about becoming minimalist because he put the work into perfecting that story.
Yeah.
So stories are what we remember. I don't know. I could talk about this for like 56 minutes in a row. Should I do like some tips on how to tell a
Yeah,
good
go
story?
for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So, okay. So perfecting your stories. Number one, most stories that people tell from stage are too long. I don't mean too long where the audience can't pay attention, but I'm saying the optimal version is not as long as you think it is. So I
Mhm.
had a guy last week send me a clip of a story that he told at a conference, and he's like, "This killed." Um, and it's a very good story. It like takes place at the White House. It has a lot of elements of the story that would work. I'm like, this story is very good. You're in a challenging spot because you can keep telling that story at a very good level, and it will always work for you. But there's a 10 out of 10 version of this story that's a lot shorter. His version is 12 minutes. The one he sent
Mhm.
me is 12 minutes. Like, ideally, we'd get that down to like two, maybe three. I mean, unless it's just the world's greatest story. So anyway, long way to say, ironically, I'm talking about like concision. You typically want stories to be a little shorter, like 1, 2, 3 minutes. The number one TED Talk is Sir Ken Robinson. It's a TED Talk that's about education, but the first half of it, like if you were to sit down and study it and take note of all the stories and how long all the stories tell, the first half of that TED Talk is it's like story elaboration, story elaboration. But there are these two stories that I've seen um, used again and again at conferences, from stage, workshops, trainings, and those two stories are under 30 seconds each. they're excellent because he put the work in to get rid of all the extraneous detail, to stop rambling, and to whittle it down, whittle it down, whittle it down. So, number one tip for you is, does the story really need to be that long? A couple other things I would always add to, just to give people. Uh, Another thing I would always think about is, how does this story end? Because the trick, one of the things I find myself telling people all the time when we're trying to perfect a story, the place where that story ends in your own brain is probably not the best place to end the story for the audience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you like, did you watch me tell that hotel story?
I don't remember.
Okay, you didn't because you'd remember the hotel story. But here's the long and the short, like the short version of the hotel story is I had a creeper at my hotel who was like trying to get into my room. And I wind up switching rooms. But that's the end of the story in real life, is I wind up switching rooms, I get a bad night's sleep, and everything's fine. But it's like that's not that great an ending for the audience. So what I actually do is I just end it with the guy calling my room and saying, "Are you sure you want to go to bed now?" And that is the end of the story. And the audience gasps, and I move on to something else. And the reason for that is because emotionally, I want to leave the audience with this feeling of like, what happened? What happened? So for you, when you're telling your stories, it doesn't have to be the audience wondering what happened, but you do need to think about, how can I end this story in such a way where there's an emotional lift for the audience? So that's one of the questions I always ask people, is like, where can I end this story so that the audience has payoff emotionally for hearing the end? It's probably not the part where in your brain the story ends. And then the third thing I would say is the use of detail. I don't know, Charity, do you have someone, you don't have to say who this is, but do you have someone in your life who's like not a good storyteller?
Totally.
So you don't have to say who it is, but what does that person do?
I think they ramble on and on and on, and they put in, so speaking of detail, it's like all of the unnecessary details of everything. And the dog and the grandma, and then she was talking to whoever with her neighbor,
Yeah.
and then it was the over, but they live on this street, and then they're over like
Yep.
that is like, yeah.
Yeah, and I was riding my bike down Patton Road. So as an audience member, you're like, okay, Patton Road, that's gonna matter. That's gonna matter. No, it
Yeah.
didn't matter, did it?
Yeah, totally.
Um, your audience might not articulate it this way, but when you're adding in details, their thought is that that detail matters.
Yeah.
Use of detail is good. Use of too much detail is bad. And I found this is especially tricky when you're just telling a story off the top of your head, which is one of the reasons why rehearsal is great. What you actually want are one or two details that allows the audience to picture the scene where the story is taking place. So it's fine to tell me that, like, I was talking to my friend Charity, and she was wearing a Slayer t-shirt. It's kind of a weird example off the top of my head, but that's fine if it helps establish like Charity's response or something. But if it's just, oh, I remember she was wearing a Slayer t-shirt that day. Like, what's really happening for that bad storyteller is they're revisiting the story in their own brain, and it's kind of fun for them because they're remembering the details about the dog and Patton Road and the Slayer t-shirt. But the audience, it's like, what? Why does that all matter? So what you want are one or two details that enables the audience to picture where the scene is taking place. So those are, I go a lot deeper with people, but three tips I would have: make it concise. Uh, number two, number two, I'm like, what was number two? Number two, think, like, really, really think about where the story should end so that there's an emotional payout for the audience. And then number three, use detail, but use it sparingly. And the point of using detail is for the audience to be able to picture the scene where this story is taking place.
Yeah, that's really good.
Like, what would you add to that? When you're telling a story, like, what's a story that you tell from stage frequently? You don't have to tell the story, but just like, what's
Well,
the name of the story?
if I tell it, would you be up for even either a little feedback or even using it as an
Oh,
example
yeah,
of,
let's do it. Let's
let's
do it.
like, okay. So I remember sitting, actually, I'll preface it. So before I get into it, the story is, it definitely dives into the deep end of like serious stuff. So I use it when I am like one of my books, it's called Meant for More. So when I'm kind of in that space of igniting your purpose and that kind of, so that's kind of the context of where this is coming from, just so you're not like, geez, Charity, we're going there. Like, all right,
First words out of my mouth.
here we go.
Everything went well until the blood was draining from my hand. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, we're
So just
starting
a
here.
little
Yeah.
bit of the context that this is typically where the story is shared. Um, so I remember sitting on the bathroom floor and I was ugly crying. You know, the ones where the mascara is dripping down your face, snot is coming out. And it was, I was sitting there in so much pain and so much shame, wondering why my body couldn't keep this baby safe. See, my husband and I, we had journeyed through loss and we'd lost a child. And I remember as I was sitting there on the bathroom floor asking the big questions, the why, God, why this baby, why this dream, why our family, why me, why us, why am I even here? I remember as I was sitting there on the bathroom floor, feeling so alone and feeling like I was buried in shame, that I was broken, that God came and met me. And he didn't give me a 7-step to get out of my whatever. He actually gave me himself. And as he brought me out of this healing journey of grief and loss, he gave me the beautiful perspective that millions of pieces and parts have to come together for life to be sustained. And so it's not a mistake that you're here. Mike, it's not a mistake that you're here. It's not for you that are listening here. It's not a mistake that you're here. You were made on purpose for a purpose out of all of eternity for this exact time. And I think one of the beautiful things is that we can teach what we know, right? There's a lot of people that they're teaching what they know. There's a lot of business professors teaching about business that have never had a business. But we actually impart what we have lived and we impart what we've experienced. And so when you hear and experience what it is that we're going to do today, you actually get infused and imparted with the unique perspective that you have a purpose here on this life, that you are meant for more, and that you are here for such a time as this.
Hmm.
So there you
That's
go.
the
There's
answer. Okay.
the story.
I'm glad you had the I'm glad you had the preamble. It's like not the beginning of the talk.
Bring
Although
it back
I
out
mean,
of the deep end.
well, no, but I mean, honestly, like sometimes the sometimes that is the beginning of the talk. Like sometimes it just is, and there are little things you can do to make it feel a little like to warn the audience a little. But if that has to be the beginning of the talk, that has to be the beginning of the talk. Okay, so that's good. What do you want some feedback?
Sure. We want to use it as an example or
Well,
uh,
I think it's good for sure. And as a family that went through some of those things myself, I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
Um, so I wanna critique this from a sheer like making the story better standpoint, not from anything else.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I think as I said, this is good. I think you have a chance to make the story a bit more visceral for people. And that's like my number one thing to think through. So there are two parts in particular that jump out to me, which is okay, so we're gonna hit a point where like God meets you and you realize this stuff. And what I would love to do now, everybody listening, this has to be true. So I'm not trying to coach Charity on fabricating anything. But from a sheer writing the story standpoint, we're gonna hit a point where God meets you, and I don't know if that feels. I don't know if that was like there's an exact moment where God meets you and you just feel like this warmth rising through you, or if it was more of a steady thing over time. But what I would love to do is to set that part up to be a feeling by also giving us more of how it felt when you're asking the big questions. Now, on some level, you do this already, right? Because we're on the bathroom floor, and mascara running on your um,
Thanks.
face. Blanking on your face. Can you tell I have a newborn at home? I'm like, what's the word thing I'm touching right now? Um, but yeah, when you're talking about feeling shame and wondering why and feeling alone, buried in shame, those are lots of things that you're saying. I just wonder if there's a physical feeling.
Mm,
And then similarly, because what I'd love to have is the juxtaposition to that to when God meets you. And I don't know. I've had a few God things where the way I always describe it is it felt like someone was putting a warm blanket on me. But
yeah.
then other times it doesn't actually feel that way. And it's only looking back, I'm like, oh, that was a God moment. I just like it didn't, it wasn't like this slow motion part in life. So that's the number one thing is how to whether it can be a bit more visceral. And then the other thing that jumped out to me is I feel like you have a chance for like a so we're meant for more is a good soundbite. You're also like not the only person who said it. So I do wonder if there's a chance for a more unique soundbite. And I don't have it, so this is maybe a homework assignment for you.
Yeah.
But if you said something like we impart what we experience.
Yeah.
So I would love to set that up with this is the part we'd have to wordsmith because what I'm going to come up with is going to sound so boring and cliche, but it's basically uh, we think bad experiences are bad, but actually we impart what we experience. Like that's too long and that's not it, but you get the idea, right? Like set up the we impart what we experience with what we think and what's not actually true or what's not actually good.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So all in all, I think that's good. It's obviously effective. Those would be things I would play with just to see if you can make it a notch higher.
Yeah, I love it. No, thanks. And I think that gives a good example for those that are listening to where they want to either be better storytellers or, okay, like, how do I tweak this and make it better? And yeah, thanks.
Yeah. But it's wild. I mean, because at first it's like stage one of telling a story is just like, I kind of remember like someone stole my volleyball. You're just like barfing like the story out. And then phase two is making that good. And then once it's good, then it's like, okay, let's really get into this. Like, let's get into exact word choice and how it felt. Like just asking yourself these questions, playing with it, seeing if you can make it better that way. Yeah. As a comparison, there was this amazing New York Times. I guess it's an article. It actually like on my phone, it played as more like an Instagram story on Taylor Tomlinson. That's her name, right? The comedian. Uh, and it walked through over like a long period of time the joke that she told to end her I don't know if it's Netflix special, but to end her like, her comedy show. And it walked through like this amazing thing of how where it started and she played around with it. And then she had a really good ending, but it involved a bunch of curses and she wanted it to be more marketable. So that's like remove the curses. So uh anyway, I just bring that up because when you're really getting into it and you're taking it really seriously, it gets down to do I want to say word A or word B to end this?
Yeah.
And it's that probably sounds perfectionist and maybe not fun, but it's actually when you're getting into it, that's like the most fun. You're like, that word with two syllables is better than the word with three, and that made all the difference.
Yeah. That's really good. Well, any closing remarks? I know you have a really great way to be able to get people to win over your audience in your first
Yeah,
13 seconds, which is huge because even what you said, like people like it's talking about the ending, people really and they remember the end, they remember the
yeah,
beginning. And then it's important, like what you were talking about even beforehand. I'm just kind of summarizing some of this stuff is the emotional response in the beginning or in the in between
yeah,
moments that really create those powerful, grabbable nuggets and
yeah,
sound bites. So people remember the beginning, they remember the end. So you obviously have an amazing resource that can help people remember the beginning and then invite them into your world to figure out the rest of the stuff.
yeah, totally. So Charity and I are two weirdos who like being on stage. Um, uh,
Stage
and
lovers unite.
I would say more accurately for me, I love being on stage like 3 times a year. And I love helping people be on stage the other times. But for a lot of people, even people who are experienced, the beginning is hard. Uh, Depending on how big the venue is. I mean, sometimes you're getting introduced and they're saying your name and there's like a spotlight on you. And then other times you're just like walking out there. But regardless, the beginning is hard. It's really strange. It's strange for them to say, no, blah, 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 Mike Pacchione. And then all of a sudden I'm walking out on a stage and I'm talking. Like there's no comparison like that in the rest of life. And it's very easy to hem and haw at the beginning. So when I work with people one-on-one, like the beginning is something we obsess over. And I've got a freebie for your audience that is specifically about the beginning, different ways that you can start a talk that wins over the audience right away so that the rest of the talk, the remaining 29 minutes and 30 seconds or however long the talk is, you've won them over at the beginning. And gosh, if you do that, it's just so much easier the rest of the way. All the stuff that people are nervous about. What if I forget? What if the slide jams? If you win the audience over at the beginning, there is so much grace for you after that.
Yeah.
But if you struggle and stammer and talk about, well, it's great to be in Atlanta today, and boy, I didn't know there were going to be so many Chick-fil-A's here, and I haven't seen like when you're doing that stuff, you're I get why people start talking and say things like that at the beginning, but you're not moving the speech forward, and it's actually making the audience feel a little impatient. So we need to win them over right away. That's what my freebie is all about. And you can find that at bestspeech.co/charity. So bestspeech.co/charity.
I love it. And Mike, where can people find you and follow you and dive into your world and learn more about you?
Yeah, totally. So my site is Best Speech. My whole goal is to coach you on giving the best speech of your life. And sometimes I work one-on-one with people for that. Uh, Group format works really, really well too. I don't know anybody who's doing has more fun and people who have more fun and who feel more empowered than when they do my group coach. So you can find all of those things. Go to my site, bestspeech.co. And on Instagram, I am MPAC. So MPACC.
Awesome. I love it. We'll make sure to have all of that in the show notes as well. So you guys definitely check it out. And Mike, one last closing
Oh, yeah.
question is where do you see the future of being a communicator? Like, what do you think
Mm,
will be the thing that really sets, like, where is this speaking industry,
yeah.
obviously as an expert that not only speaks on stages, but equips people to be on stages, like where do you see it going that will give people the unfair advantage in that industry?
Yeah. So my answer, I think, depends a little bit on where people think AI is going to take things.
Yeah.
My instinct in a world where AI doesn't just take over, so that's the world I'd like to live in. Uh,
Right.
my, my
You can both.
instinct
You can
is,
do both.
yeah, my instinct is that in that world, all the little things that you can say in a talk that are proof of your humanity are
Mm.
going to be really, really big wins. So anything about you that's weird, or anything that's about you that's a feeling or a quirk, or even talking about like TV shows that you love, I think all those things are going to stand out because I mean, we all know what robotic text sounds like. And by the way, robotic text predates ChatGPT. There are a lot of people talking that way already. But I think especially moving forward, all the little things about you as a person that can connect to your audience, I think those are going to really, really stand out. And anybody who can do that from stage is going to win.
So good. There's nothing that replaces the human. AI is a great
I hope
tool.
so.
I know, right? But that human to human connection, there's something so special about it. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All
So
right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise and even the little hot seat tweak
um,
feedback and all of that fun stuff. And
I love it. Thanks so much for being willing to do that. And to your audience, I love so much helping people become the speaker that they want or need to be. So be in touch. And Charity, thank you so much for having me on, really.
Yeah, it was an honor. We'll be in touch soon for sure. Thanks for being here.
Sounds good, friend.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope it brought some value and some fun into your business and life. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and even share the episode with a fellow business bestie who you know will love it. It helps us continue to attract top-level guests and reach more and more women who are on their journey in business just like you. Remember that when money gets in the hands of good women, great things happen. Cheers to your success.